Good morning. You are listening to Calon FM and you're listening to me, Wayne Price, where for the next an hour and a half, we'll be doing our usual thing of just basically entertaining you and being your imaginary person almost during the day as you get ready for work, college, school, or just maybe having a lounge about. Now, we're starting a new feature today, and today's new feature is called Organisation of the Week. And the idea is, well, for the next forever, what we're going to do is we're just going to invite an organisation in and let them talk a little bit each day so they can tell you about what they do and how you can help them. That's it. It's as simple as that. And our first featured organisation of the week is the Wrexham Civic Society. And in the building with me right now, I have Nick Rowe. Nick, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. And this is a strange one. Now, the Wrexham Civic Society has been going for a number of years, correct?
That's been going since 1974.
1974, so almost as old as me. Now, the one thing which... now, I'm going to sound ignorant here to a lot of people on the radio, but it's okay because I'm meant to be ignorant because I'm a radio presenter. And the question really I have to ask is, when I think of the Wrexham Civic Society, the only thing I know is every time I walk through Argyle Street, or as the graffiti once said, Plymouth Argyle Street. And the old archway there, and inside the archway is a little monument, maybe some sort of description thing where basically it tells us that there was once upon a time the person which did the first Channel Tunnel came from Wrexham, and there is a little monument to him, and it's a nice little piece of artwork. And the question is that's all I know about the Civic Society. You please tell me, what does it really do, and how can just tell us more about it.
Okay, Wayne, well, you have drawn attention to one of the things which the Civic Society does, which is put up plaques in places of historic or architectural interest around the town. There are others. For example, above the town well in Pentrevellin, or facing the Davis Brothers gates to the churchyard.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot else that the Civic Society does. Civic societies began. I've already said that the Civic Society was founded in 1974. A lot of civic societies began in that period, the late 1960s, early 1970s, when huge changes were taking place in town centres.
Yep.
Historic buildings were being lost, whole districts of towns were being lost for building road schemes, shopping malls, new housing projects, and civic societies arose really to not to try and stop this happening, but to maybe just question the intellectual basis of it and to challenge some of the more excessive things that were going on, and to protect buildings and places which were of historical architectural value that needed to be kept for future generations.
Now, you mentioned, the idea of keeping the buildings. Now, as we were before off air, we were gossiping a little bit, as we do in between songs. And the one thing which struck me even more than anything is that Wrexham has, for whatever the criticism which the town gets occasionally, it has an awful lot of absolutely beautiful old buildings. What I would say are architecturally pleasing. Every time I go down Hope Street, Regent Street, and I look above the shop facade, there is really amazing types of building, whether it be Art Deco, Victorian buildings, and whatever. Can you tell me, what's the situation? Do we have the same amount or less as, say, Chester, which is known throughout the world of being this architecturally historical buildings?
Well, my hunch is that we've got more left than Chester has proportionately. Chester, of course, is bigger.
Yeah.
But if you look at Chester, and look at what was done there in the 1960s and 70s, swathes of medieval and Georgian buildings were destroyed when the inner ring road was cut through in the 70s. A whole quarter between Watergate Street and Northgate Street where the Gateway Theatre used to be has been lost. That used to be small streets, houses, small businesses, and similarly the other area south of Watergate Street, between Watergate Street and Bridge Street, there is rather more left there, but it's piecemeal and a lot of it's derelict. So the buildings that have been destroyed in Wrexham, obviously it shouldn't have been destroyed, but please don't just isolate Wrexham for criticism.
It's, I mean, what's we were talking before, on a personal view, what historical buildings do we need to be looking at, or what should we be, instead of just being going our way and going for fast food or going for a coffee and all those things. I did that without actually mentioning any names. That was well done. But what would you? I mean, obviously, Horse and Jockey is the first one I would come to because it's got a thatched roof. But what other buildings are there? The reason I say that before I go on is because one of my friends in Manchester came over for a weekend, and it was the first time that she ever had the chance to sit in a thatched roof building. You don't realise it. Obviously, in some ways, we're better than Manchester. But tell me, which buildings do you think we should look at?
Well, you can start with the Horse and Jockey. That's I don't know how old that is, but it's a timber frame building. It looks as though it predates most of the buildings along Regent Street where it is. But if you like buildings of that genre, look down Town Hill, the corner of Town Hill and Church Street, that block. There are buildings there which go back to the 14th century, probably.
Yes.
There's a whole group of them, including a quite spectacular 14th century hall house, which is now I think is now a cafe, a bar.
Yes, yeah. It's I think it was originally I remember it being a wine bar. I think I remember it's being like 3 or 4 different buildings all put into one. But yes.
Yeah, but Wrexham predominantly is a Victorian and Edwardian town centre, and if you walk along High Street, maybe ignore the fascias at ground level and look up, there are some very impressive 19th and early 20th century commercial buildings, bank buildings especially.
Yes.
Which are now, a lot of them have been converted into wine bars, of course, buildings like that often have.
Yes.
But in a way that makes them more accessible. We blame the bankers for an awful lot, but one thing they really did for us was leave us with a lot of really good buildings. Again, comparing with Chester, I like Wrexham High Street a lot more than I like Eastgate Street in Chester. I think Wrexham High Street is visually a lot more consistent.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
All right, okay, right. We'll leave it there. We're back tomorrow and we'll talk a bit more about the Civic Society. Thanks very much, Nick. And here's a song. Thank you again.